The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that makes you hold your breath. 8-year-old Lily sat on the witness stand, clutching a stuffed bear, her wide eyes scanning the faces in the room. Her mother, a decorated police detective, sat at one table, her father at the other. Both were waiting for Lily's words, words that could decide everything. Finally, Lily looked at the judge, her voice soft but clear. "My mom told me to lie." The entire courtroom froze. The courtroom was packed with people, the air heavy with tension. The case had drawn significant attention in the small Ohio town. Sarah Miller, a respected police detective, was fighting for full custody of her 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Opposing her was Ryan Hayes, her ex-husband, a hard-working mechanic known in the community for his quiet, steady demeanor. The two sat at opposite ends of the room, their faces reflecting the weight of the battle they were waging. Sarah's lawyer had presented a compelling case so far, complete with carefully curated evidence that painted Ryan in a negative light. There were photographs, witness testimonies, and Sarah's own detailed accounts of what she claimed were instances of neglect and unfit parenting. To many in the courtroom, it seemed like a slam dunk. Sarah was a police officer, someone the community trusted, and her professionalism gave her accusations weight. Ryan, however, sat quietly at his table, his expression somber but calm. His lawyer had done their best to poke holes in Sarah's narrative, suggesting that some of her evidence was circumstantial and that her position as a detective might have allowed her to present an exaggerated case. But the odds were stacked against him, and he knew it. Sarah's testimony had been precise and confident, leaving little room for doubt, at least on the surface. The judge presiding over the case, John Harris, was a seasoned professional. With more than 20 years of experience, he had seen every kind of custody dispute imaginable. Yet something about this case unsettled him. It wasn't just the high stakes or the emotionally charged nature of the arguments, it was the child at the center of it all. Lily. Lily was a quiet, shy girl who had yet to speak in court. But today, she was scheduled to testify, a moment both parents had anxiously awaited. Her testimony could very well decide the outcome of the case. As the court clerk called for a short recess before Lily's appearance, Sarah leaned over to her lawyer, her expression sharp. "She knows what to say," she said in a low voice. "We've gone over it. Everything will be fine." Ryan, on the other side of the courtroom, watched Sarah carefully. He could feel the tension radiating off her, though she masked it well. Something about her confidence felt off. He didn't want to believe she would manipulate their daughter, but the thought lingered in the back of his mind, unsettling him. When the recess ended, the doors opened, and a bailiff gently led Lily into the courtroom. She looked small and fragile, clutching a stuffed bear tightly in her arms as she walked to the witness stand. The room fell silent as everyone's attention turned to her. Judge Harris offered her a kind smile, trying to put her at ease. "Good morning, Lily," he said, his voice warm. "I know this is a little scary, but you're very brave for being here. Do you understand why you're here today?" Lily nodded slightly, her big eyes darting between her parents. Her grip on the bear tightened. "I'm just going to ask you a few questions, and you can answer however you like," the judge continued. "Take your time. There's no rush." Lily glanced at Sarah, who gave her an encouraging nod. Then she looked at Ryan, who smiled softly, his eyes filled with quiet reassurance. For a moment, Lily hesitated, as if weighing something heavy in her mind. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. No one could have predicted the weight of the words she was about to speak. Lily sat on the witness stand, her small hands clutching the stuffed bear tightly as she looked out over the courtroom. The judge's warm expression gave her a little courage, but the heavy silence in the room pressed down on her. She knew everyone was waiting for her to speak, to tell them something important. She glanced at her mother, Sarah, who gave her a sharp nod of encouragement, her lips pursed tightly. Then her eyes drifted to her father, Ryan, who looked at her with a quiet, reassuring smile, his face soft and calm despite the tension in the room. The judge leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle. Lily, can you tell us how you feel about your parents? We just want to hear about how things are for you. Take your time. Lily's gaze flickered back to Sarah. Her mother had always been the confident one, the one who told her how to behave, how to act, and what to say. Her father, on the other hand, had always been her safe place, calm and patient, never demanding anything from her. A knot of anxiety twisted in her chest as she struggled to find her voice. My mom, Lily began hesitantly, her voice small and uncertain. She hesitated, looking down at the bear in her lap as her fingers fiddled with its soft fur. She works a lot. She's always busy. Sarah's lawyer quickly interjected. That's because she's a dedicated officer, isn't it, Lily? She works hard to keep people safe. Lily nodded slightly but didn't look up. Yes. She works hard. And your dad? The lawyer prompted, his tone sharp as if leading her to the correct answer. How does your dad treat you? Lily looked up, her gaze darting toward Ryan. He's nice, she said simply. He takes care of me. The lawyer frowned slightly, clearly not satisfied with the response. But has he ever made you feel unsafe or uncomfortable? Before Lily could answer, Sarah leaned forward slightly in her seat, her presence commanding even from across the room. It's okay, sweetheart, Sarah said, her voice soft but firm. You can tell them the truth. Lily's small body stiffened, her hands gripping the bear even tighter. She felt the weight of her mother's words like a command, a reminder of everything they had talked about at home. But then she looked back at Ryan, who gave her a small nod, as if to say, it's okay to speak your heart. The judge noticed the hesitation and spoke again, his tone calm and encouraging. Lily, there's no right or wrong answer here. We just want to hear what you have to say. You're safe, and no one will be upset with you for being honest. Lily took a deep breath, her small shoulders rising and falling. For a moment, it seemed like she was gathering all the courage she could find. Then, finally, she spoke, her words coming out in a soft but clear voice. My mom says my dad is bad, Lily said, her voice trembling slightly. But he's not. He's never been bad to me. The room fell into a stunned silence. Sarah's face turned pale, her jaw tightening as she stared at Lily. Ryan's expression didn't change, but his eyes glistened slightly, as if he was holding back tears. The judge leaned forward, his interest piqued. What do you mean, Lily? Can you tell us more? Lily hesitated again, her voice barely above a whisper. She told me to say that my dad hurt me. But he didn't. She told me if I didn't say that, I would disappoint her. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Sarah shot to her feet, her face flushed. That's not true, she exclaimed. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. Mrs. Miller, please sit down, the judge said firmly, his tone carrying an edge of authority. He turned back to Lily, his voice soft again. Lily, are you saying your mom asked you to say things that aren't true? Lily nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. She said it's the only way she could keep me safe. But my dad never hurt me. He loves me. The weight of her words settled heavily over the courtroom, the once clear narrative now unraveling. Sarah's confident demeanor was cracking, and Ryan sat frozen in his seat, his expression a mix of pain and relief. The judge sat back, his face unreadable as he processed what had just been said. Thank you, Lily, he said gently. You've been very brave. Lily nodded, clutching her bear as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. As she was escorted out of the room, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The truth she had spoken had thrown everything into question, and it was clear to everyone that the case was far from over. The courtroom was in stunned silence after Lily's testimony. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, and no one dared to speak. Judge Harris sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable as he glanced from Sarah to Ryan. He had seen many custody battles in his career, but rarely one where a child's words so directly contradicted the claims of a parent. Sarah sat stiffly at her table, her hands clenched tightly around the edge of her chair. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently to her, but she waved him off. Her usual confidence was cracking, and her face betrayed the slightest flicker of panic. Ryan, on the other hand, looked overwhelmed. He had stayed quiet throughout the trial, weathering accusation after accusation, but now the truth was finally out in the open. He let out a slow breath, his shoulders relaxing slightly, though his eyes remained on Sarah. "Ms. Miller," the judge said, breaking the silence, "I need an explanation for what we just heard." Sarah stood abruptly, trying to regain her composure. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "my daughter is confused. She's a child, she doesn't fully understand what's happening. She's been under a lot of stress, and I believe that's affecting her ability to recall events accurately." The judge raised an eyebrow, his skepticism evident. "Are you suggesting that your daughter fabricated her testimony?" "I'm suggesting that she may have misunderstood my intentions," Sarah replied, her voice firming up. "All I've ever wanted was to protect Lily. My priority has always been her safety." Ryan's lawyer seized the moment. "Your Honor," he said, standing, "with all due respect, Lily's testimony wasn't the product of confusion. It was clear, direct, and sincere. The child was told to lie, and that instruction came from her own mother." "That's not true," Sarah snapped, her voice rising as she turned toward Ryan's table. "He's twisting her words. I've done everything for Lily, everything." "Mrs. Miller," Judge Harris interrupted, his tone sharp. "I strongly advise you to control yourself. This is a court of law, and I will not tolerate outbursts." Sarah fell silent, though her hands were still clenched into fists. The judge turned back to Ryan's lawyer. "Do you have any evidence to support your client's claim beyond Lily's testimony?" Ryan's lawyer nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. We have additional witnesses who can attest to Ms. Miller's manipulative behavior, both in her professional and personal life. We also have text messages and emails that suggest she was coaching Lily on what to say during these proceedings." Sarah's face went pale, but she quickly recovered. "This is ridiculous," she said, forcing a laugh. "Those so-called witnesses are probably his friends trying to discredit me. And as for the emails, they've been taken out of context." The judge held up a hand to stop her. "Ms. Miller, you will have an opportunity to respond when your lawyer presents your case. For now, I'd like to proceed with the evidence." Ryan's lawyer stepped forward, presenting a folder to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. Inside were printed messages that Ryan claimed were from Sarah, instructing Lily on how to describe her father negatively if asked. The judge read the documents carefully, his brow furrowing. "These messages are concerning," he said after a moment. "If they are genuine, they suggest a deliberate attempt to manipulate the outcome of this case." "They are genuine," Ryan's lawyer said confidently. "And we're prepared to call witnesses who can corroborate my client's account of Ms. Miller's behavior." Sarah's lawyer stood, his face tight with frustration. "Your Honor, we object to the introduction of these messages without proper authentication. This is a desperate attempt to slander my client." The judge nodded. "I'll allow the evidence to be reviewed and authenticated by a forensic expert. In the meantime, I'd like to hear from the witnesses." Ryan's lawyer called the first witness, a former neighbor who had known both Sarah and Ryan during their marriage. The woman testified that Sarah often spoke poorly of Ryan, even in front of Lily, and that she seemed determined to paint him as an unfit father. The second witness, a retired police officer who had worked with Sarah, testified reluctantly. Sarah was a dedicated officer, he admitted. But she had a habit of bending the truth when it suited her. She wasn't above using her position to get what she wanted. Each testimony added another crack to Sarah's carefully constructed narrative. By the time the court adjourned for the day, the tension in the room was palpable. Ryan approached his lawyer as they packed up their materials. "Do you think this will be enough?" he asked quietly. His lawyer placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We're getting there," he said. "But the most important thing is that Lily told the truth. That's something no one can ignore. As Ryan left the courtroom, he glanced back at Sarah. She was sitting alone at her table, her head in her hands. For the first time, she didn't look like the confident, composed detective she had been throughout the trial. She looked like someone who was losing control. The courtroom felt heavier the next morning as everyone filed in for what was expected to be one of the most pivotal days of the trial. The air buzzed with quiet anticipation, whispers between attorneys, the shifting of papers, and the occasional side glance between Sarah and Ryan. Sarah, who had always walked into the courtroom with an air of authority, now appeared more subdued. Her usual confident posture was replaced with a slight tension in her shoulders, though her face remained composed. Ryan, on the other hand, carried himself with quiet determination. The events of the previous day had shifted the momentum, and he could feel it. Judge Harris took his seat, glancing down at his notes before addressing the room. Before we proceed, I want to remind everyone that this is a case concerning the welfare of a child. It is not about punishing either party but ensuring the best interests of Lily are served. Let's keep that in focus as we move forward. Ryan's lawyer stood first, prepared to delve further into the evidence introduced the day before. Your Honor, as previously presented, we've supplied text messages and emails that suggest Ms. Miller attempted to coach her daughter on what to say during this trial. We have now authenticated those communications through a forensic analysis. The bailiff handed a report to Judge Harris, who reviewed it carefully. The courtroom was silent as the judge's expression grew more serious. After a moment, he looked up at Sarah's lawyer. Do you have any objections to the findings of this analysis? Sarah's lawyer stood, his face tight. Your Honor, while the authenticity of these messages may not be in question, the context is. My client was under immense stress due to her concern for her daughter's safety. Any instructions given were intended to protect Lily, not to manipulate her testimony. Ryan's lawyer immediately responded. Your Honor, protecting a child does not justify coercing them to lie in court. Lily's own words have already revealed that she felt pressured by her mother. These messages only confirm that pressure. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Her usually calm demeanor was beginning to falter under the weight of the evidence. The judge sighed deeply, setting the report aside. We will consider this evidence alongside the other testimony. Mr. Hayes, do you have additional witnesses to call? Yes, Your Honor, Ryan's lawyer replied. I'd like to call Dr. Emily Carter, a child psychologist, to the stand. She conducted an evaluation with Lily following her testimony. Dr. Carter, a middle-aged woman with a calm, professional demeanor, took the stand. After being sworn in, she addressed the court. I spent 2 hours speaking with Lily in a private, neutral setting. During that time, I asked her open-ended questions about her feelings toward both parents and the situation she's found herself in. And what did you conclude? Ryan's lawyer asked. Dr. Carter folded her hands neatly in her lap. Lily is a bright and sensitive child. She expressed a great deal of love for both parents, but she also conveyed significant distress regarding her mother's instructions. She said, and I quote, Mom told me I have to say bad things about Dad, even though they're not true. She seemed conflicted, wanting to please her mother but also feeling guilty about saying things that didn't match her own experiences. The courtroom murmured at this statement. Ryan's lawyer nodded, clearly satisfied. In your professional opinion, Dr. Carter, how might this pressure impact Lily's emotional well-being? It could have long-term effects, Dr. Carter said seriously. Being asked to lie, especially about a parent, puts a tremendous emotional burden on a child. It can lead to anxiety, guilt, and confusion about right and wrong. Lily appears to have internalized a sense of responsibility for keeping both parents happy, which is not something a child her age should bear. Ryan's lawyer turned to the judge. No further questions, Your Honor. Sarah's lawyer rose next, his tone sharp as he addressed Dr. Carter. Dr. Carter, would you agree that custody disputes are inherently stressful for children? Couldn't this pressure Lily feels be a result of the trial itself, rather than my client's actions? Dr. Carter nodded thoughtfully. It's true that custody disputes are difficult for children. However, in this case, Lily specifically attributed her distress to her mother's direct instructions. That level of specificity is uncommon in young children and suggests a very real, very targeted pressure. Sarah's lawyer pressed further, but it was clear the testimony had made its mark. By the time Dr. Carter stepped down, the courtroom was buzzing again, the tide continuing to shift in Ryan's favor. Judge Harris looked at Sarah. Ms. Miller, would you like to take the stand to address these allegations directly? Sarah hesitated, glancing at her lawyer, who nodded subtly. Slowly, she stood and made her way to the witness stand. For the first time, her confidence wavered as she raised her hand to take the oath. Once seated, her lawyer began questioning her. Ms. Miller, can you explain your actions regarding the instructions allegedly given to Lily? Sarah took a deep breath, her voice steady but less commanding than before. I was scared, Your Honor. I thought if I didn't show the court how unfit Ryan was, I'd lose my daughter. I did tell her what to say, but it wasn't to harm anyone. It was to protect her. Ryan's lawyer stood immediately. Protect her from what, Ms. Miller? Has Ryan ever harmed Lily? Sarah faltered. No, not physically. But I thought he wasn't capable of raising her the way I could. So you lied, Ryan's lawyer pressed. You lied to the court, and you tried to make your daughter lie as well. Sarah didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any words she could have spoken. Judge Harris leaned forward, his tone firm. Ms. Miller, this court takes the welfare of children very seriously. Using your position as a parent and as a police officer to manipulate the truth is deeply troubling. I suggest you consider your next words carefully as we proceed. Sarah's face was pale, her mask of confidence fully shattered. The courtroom sat in silence, waiting for what would come next. The courtroom felt heavier than ever as Sarah remained on the witness stand, her hands resting tensely on the wooden railing in front of her. She stared down at her lap, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. Her silence lingered, creating a vacuum that seemed to draw the attention of every single person present. Judge Harris leaned forward slightly, his expression calm but serious, as if willing her to speak. Finally, Sarah took a deep breath and lifted her head. Your Honor, she began, her voice shaking but audible, I made mistakes. I acted out of fear, out of desperation. I was afraid of losing Lily, and I thought if I could control the narrative, if I could convince everyone that Ryan wasn't fit to be a parent, I'd be protecting her. I see now that I was wrong. Her words sent a ripple of murmurs through the courtroom. Ryan watched her from the defense table, his expression a mix of anger and something softer, though he wasn't sure what. This was the first time he'd heard Sarah admit fault, even partially. Sarah's lawyer stepped forward, sensing an opportunity to reframe her admission. Ms. Miller, can you explain why you felt such fear for Lily's safety? Were there specific incidents or patterns of behavior from Mr. Hayes that led to your concerns? Sarah hesitated, choosing her words carefully. It wasn't about what Ryan did, she admitted quietly. It was about what I thought he couldn't do. He's a good person, but I didn't think he could handle raising Lily on his own. I thought she'd be better off with me. Ryan's lawyer rose, his voice firm but not overly aggressive. Ms. Miller, you've just admitted that your concerns were based on assumptions, not facts. Is that correct? Sarah nodded reluctantly. Yes. And because of those assumptions, you fabricated evidence, pressured your daughter to lie, and misused your position as a police officer to manipulate this court. Is that correct? Sarah's lawyer objected immediately. Your Honor, that's a mischaracterization of my client's actions. Judge Harris raised a hand. Overruled. Let her answer. Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment and guilt. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That's correct. Ryan's lawyer stepped back, satisfied. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Harris looked at Sarah with a mix of disappointment and gravity. Ms. Miller, I appreciate your honesty, but your actions have had serious consequences. The trust placed in you as a parent and as an officer of the law has been damaged, and that trust is not easily repaired. The judge turned his attention back to the attorneys. Do we have any additional evidence or witnesses to present before I make my decision? Ryan's lawyer glanced at his notes and shook his head. No, Your Honor. Sarah's lawyer also declined. No further evidence from us, Your Honor. The judge nodded, signaling the end of the trial phase. Very well. I will review all the evidence, including today's testimony, before rendering my decision. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. The gavel struck, and the room began to stir as people gathered their belongings and prepared to leave. Ryan remained seated, watching as Sarah slowly stepped down from the stand. She glanced at him briefly, her face filled with an odd mixture of regret and exhaustion, but she said nothing. He didn't either. There was too much unsaid between them, and this wasn't the time or place to untangle it. As Ryan exited the courtroom, Lily's face filled his thoughts. She had been brave, braver than he ever could have asked of her. He wondered what the weight of this trial had done to her, whether she would carry the burden of her testimony with her as she grew up. He resolved, then and there, to make sure she never doubted her strength or the love that surrounded her. The next morning, when Ryan arrived at the courthouse, the atmosphere was different. It was quieter, as if the weight of the pending decision had settled on everyone's shoulders. Sarah sat alone at her table, her shoulders hunched as she stared straight ahead. Ryan watched her for a moment, feeling a flicker of sympathy. He didn't hate her, he never had. He knew her actions had been wrong, but deep down, he also knew she had been acting out of fear, even if it had caused harm. Judge Harris entered the room, and everyone rose before sitting again in unison. The judge shuffled some papers before addressing the courtroom. This case has been challenging, he began, his tone measured. It's always difficult to weigh the emotions and actions of parents against the best interests of a child. But my duty is to ensure that Lily's safety and well-being are the top priority. Ryan held his breath as the judge continued. After reviewing all the evidence and testimony, it is clear that Ms. Miller's actions were inappropriate and harmful, both to Lily and to this court. However, I also acknowledge that these actions stem from a misguided attempt to protect her daughter. Nonetheless, trust has been broken, and until it is restored, I cannot in good conscience grant Ms. Miller full custody. A wave of relief washed over Ryan as the judge turned to him. Mr. Hayes, you have demonstrated patience and consistency throughout this trial. You will be granted primary custody of Lily. Ms. Miller, you will retain visitation rights, but they will be supervised for the time being. Additionally, I am ordering mandatory counseling for both parties to address the issues raised during this trial. The gavel struck again, signaling the decision. Ryan exhaled deeply, his shoulders sagging with relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt like he could breathe. As the courtroom emptied, Sarah approached him hesitantly. For a moment, they just stood there, neither sure what to say. Finally, she spoke. Ryan. I'm sorry. For everything. He looked at her, his expression softening. I know, he said simply. But this isn't about us anymore. It's about Lily. Let's do better for her. Sarah nodded, tears filling her eyes. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The weeks following the court's decision were filled with adjustments. For Ryan, life as Lily's primary caregiver was both a blessing and a challenge. He had spent years dreaming of this opportunity, but now that it was real, the weight of responsibility felt heavier than he had expected. Every morning, he woke up early to pack Lily's lunch, make her breakfast, and walk her to school. He had to reorganize his work schedule at the garage to ensure he could be there for her, juggling the demands of parenting and providing. Yet, despite the exhaustion, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Lily adjusted quickly to her new routine, her laughter becoming more frequent as the days passed. She seemed lighter, as if the burden of the trial had finally lifted. She was still quiet at times, but Ryan made it a point to check in with her every evening. They would sit together on the couch, eating popcorn and watching her favorite movies, or talk about her day over dinner. One evening, as Lily drew at the kitchen table while Ryan did the dishes, she suddenly asked, "Dad, do you think Mom's mad at me?" Ryan paused, his hands dripping with soapy water. He turned to face her, his expression gentle. "No, sweetheart. I don't think she's mad at you." "Why would you think that?" Lily shrugged, her pencil still moving across the paper. "Because I said things in court. Things she didn't want me to say." Ryan walked over, kneeling beside her chair so they were at a level. "Lily, what you said in court was the truth. You were brave, and you did the right thing. Your mom might have made some mistakes, but she loves you very much. She's not mad at you." Lily looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Finally, she nodded and returned to her drawing. Ryan stayed there for a moment longer, watching her, before returning to the dishes. He knew that the wounds from the trial wouldn't heal overnight, but he was determined to give Lily the stability and love she deserved. Meanwhile, Sarah had begun attending the court-mandated counseling sessions. At first, she resisted, treating them as little more than a formality. But as the sessions progressed, she began to confront the choices she had made and the reasons behind them. Her counselor, a calm and empathetic woman named Dr. Lane, pushed her to dig deeper. "Why did you feel the need to control the narrative so strongly?" Dr. Lane asked during one session. Sarah sighed, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "Because I was scared. Scared of losing Lily. Scared that if I didn't fight hard enough, she would be taken away from me." "But do you see now that your actions may have caused her harm?" Dr. Lane pressed gently. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. I do. I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting on her until I saw her on the witness stand. She's just a little girl, and I made her carry my fears. That wasn't fair to her." Dr. Lane leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but firm. "Acknowledging that is a good first step. But healing takes more than just admitting mistakes. You need to work to rebuild the trust that was broken, with Lily and with yourself." After the session, Sarah sat alone in her car for a long time, staring out the windshield. The weight of her choices pressed heavily on her chest, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. She couldn't change the past, but she could try to make amends and be better for Lily's future. Supervised visitation began shortly after. At first, the meetings between Sarah and Lily were awkward. They met at a neutral location, with a social worker present to monitor their interactions. Sarah desperately wanted to apologize, to explain herself, but the words caught in her throat every time. Instead, she focused on making Lily feel comfortable. They played board games, colored together, and talked about school. Slowly, Lily began to open up again, her shy smiles reassuring Sarah that not all was lost. One day, as they sat together at a table in the visitation center, Lily said, "I miss how things used to be. When we all lived in the same house." Sarah's heart ached at her words, but she forced herself to stay composed. "I miss that too," she admitted. "But even though things are different now, I'm still your mom, and I'll always love you. No matter what." Lily looked up at her, her eyes wide and serious. "Promise?" Sarah reached across the table and took Lily's small hand in hers. "I promise." Later that evening, Lily told Ryan about the visit. "Mom said she loves me no matter what," she said, her voice thoughtful. Ryan smiled as he tucked her into bed. "That's true, sweetheart. And so do I. You're the most important person in the world to both of us." As he turned off the light and left her room, Ryan couldn't help but feel a cautious sense of optimism. Things weren't perfect, far from it, but they were moving forward. And for the first time, it felt like there was hope for their fractured family to find some kind of peace. As the months passed, life began to take on a new rhythm. Ryan and Lily had settled into their routines, their days filled with the quiet, everyday moments that made up a happy home. Ryan had grown into his role as a full-time parent, becoming more confident with each passing day. Lily, in turn, seemed lighter and more carefree, her laughter echoing through the house as they played board games or worked on her school projects together. Yet, even as things improved, Ryan couldn't ignore the lingering presence of Sarah in their lives. Her supervised visits with Lily were going well, and the reports from the social worker were consistently positive. Each time they met, Sarah seemed to grow a little softer, a little more patient, as if she was finally learning to let go of the need to control everything. One evening, after picking Lily up from a visit with Sarah, Ryan noticed that she was unusually quiet in the car. She stared out the window, her stuffed bear clutched tightly in her lap. "Everything okay, kiddo?" Ryan asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Lily hesitated before answering. "Dad, do you think Mom is different now?" Ryan thought carefully before responding. "What do you mean by different?" Lily shrugged, still looking out the window. "She doesn't seem as angry anymore. She doesn't tell me what to say or do like she used to. She just talks to me. Like you do." Ryan's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. It was difficult for him to reconcile this new version of Sarah with the woman who had caused so much pain. But he also knew that people could change if they were willing to put in the work. "I think she's trying to be better," Ryan said finally. "For you." Lily turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think she's sad that we don't live together anymore?" Ryan sighed, feeling the weight of her question. "I think she's sad about a lot of things, Lily. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. She's doing her best to show you that now." Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer, and the rest of the drive home was quiet. Later that week, Ryan received a phone call from Sarah. It was the first time she had called him directly since the trial, and for a moment, he considered letting it go to voicemail. But something told him to answer. "Ryan," Sarah said, her voice hesitant. "Hi. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "No, it's fine," he replied, keeping his tone neutral. "What's going on?" There was a pause on the other end of the line before she spoke again. "I wanted to talk to you about Lily. And about everything. I know I've caused a lot of damage, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know that I'm trying. The counseling, the visits, they'd helped me see how much I got wrong. I want to make things right, not just for Lily, but for all of us." Ryan leaned back against the kitchen counter, processing her words. "I appreciate you saying that," he said carefully. "But making things right isn't about just words, Sarah. It's about consistency. Lily needs to see that she can trust you again." "I know," Sarah said quietly. "And I'm ready to do whatever it takes. I'm not asking for anything more than a chance to keep showing up for her. For now, that's enough." Ryan nodded, though she couldn't see him. "Then keep doing what you're doing. Lily notices the changes, and it's making a difference. Just take it one day at a time." The call ended on a surprisingly hopeful note, leaving Ryan with a strange sense of relief. It wasn't closure, not yet, but it was a step in the right direction. A few weeks later, Lily had a school play, and both Ryan and Sarah were invited to attend. It was the first time they had been in the same room outside of court or supervised visits. Ryan arrived early, helping Lily with her costume backstage, while Sarah found a seat in the audience. When the performance began, Sarah sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap as she watched Lily on stage. She didn't try to wave or call attention to herself, choosing instead to simply be present. Ryan noticed the change and couldn't help but feel a small flicker of hope. After the play, Lily ran to both of them, her face glowing with excitement. "Did you see me? Did you see me?" "You were amazing," Ryan said, lifting her up in a hug. "You were perfect," Sarah added, her voice warm but restrained. For a moment, the three of them stood together, sharing in Lily's joy. It wasn't the life they had once imagined, but it was a beginning, an imperfect, fragile step towards something better. In the months that followed the school play, the fragile but growing sense of peace between Ryan and Sarah began to solidify. Their interactions, while still cautious, were more collaborative than they had been in years. They both seemed to recognize that the most important thing was Lily's happiness and well-being, and for the first time, they were genuinely working together to make that happen. Lily thrived in the new dynamic. She spent most of her time with Ryan, but her visits with Sarah had shifted from being stiff and awkward to warm and relaxed. The supervised aspect of the visits was gradually lifted after Sarah demonstrated consistent progress in her counseling sessions and showed that she was prioritizing Lily's needs. The trust that had been shattered during the custody battle wasn't fully repaired, but it was beginning to mend. One Saturday morning, Ryan was in the kitchen making pancakes when Lily bounded in, her face bright with excitement. "Dad! Mom said we could all go to the park together today. Can we?" Ryan paused, his spatula hovering over the griddle. "All of us?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah. She said she could meet us there, and we could have a picnic or something," Lily said, practically bouncing on her toes. Ryan thought about it for a moment. The idea of spending time with Sarah outside of their co-parenting responsibilities was unexpected. But then he saw the hope in Lily's eyes and knew his answer. "Okay," he said with a smile. "Let's do it." Later that afternoon, they arrived at the park. Lily ran ahead to the swings while Ryan carried the picnic basket. Sarah was already waiting at a bench, holding a small cooler. She stood as they approached, her posture a little hesitant but her smile genuine. "Hi," she said softly. "Thanks for agreeing to this." Ryan nodded. "Lily's been excited about it all morning. How could I say no?" They spread out a blanket under a large tree, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the three of them sat together without the weight of the past hanging heavily over them. They shared sandwiches and laughed at Lily's stories about school. Ryan watched as Sarah pushed Lily on the swings, her laughter mixing with her daughter's in a way that felt natural and unforced. At one point, while Lily was playing on the slide, Sarah turned to Ryan. "You've done an amazing job with her," she said. "I see how happy she is, how secure." "That's because of you." Ryan looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "It's not just me," he said. "You've been putting in the work, too." She sees that, and it means a lot to her. Sarah smiled faintly, her eyes distant for a moment. "I never thought we'd get to a place like this. I didn't know if it was even possible after everything." "Neither did I," Ryan admitted. "But it's good for her to see us like this. It shows her we can be a team, even if things didn't work out the way we planned." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Lily climb up and down the jungle gym. There was no need to say more. The moment spoke for itself. As the sun began to set and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Lily ran back to them, her cheeks flushed from playing. "Can we do this again sometime?" she asked, looking at both of them with hopeful eyes. Ryan glanced at Sarah, who nodded. "Yeah," Ryan said, smiling at Lily. "I think we can." That evening, as Ryan tucked Lily into bed, she wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "I'm really happy, Dad." He kissed her forehead and smiled. "Me too, kiddo." Walking out of her room, Ryan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The road they had traveled had been long and painful, but they had reached a place of understanding and collaboration. It wasn't the picture-perfect family they might have dreamed of, but it was real, and it was enough. For the first time, their fractured family felt whole in its own way, a new kind of beginning, filled with hope for the future. The ending of this story is a testament to the power of growth, forgiveness, and prioritizing the well-being of a child over personal grievances. While it began as a painful and deeply divisive custody battle, the resolution highlights how even fractured relationships can begin to heal when the focus shifts from anger to cooperation. The fact that Sarah acknowledged her mistakes and made genuine efforts to change adds a layer of realism to the story. People are flawed, but they are capable of redemption when they choose to confront those flaws. Lily's role in bringing the truth to light serves as a reminder of how resilient children can be, but also underscores the responsibility adults have to shield them from unnecessary burdens. Her honesty not only exposed the flaws in her mother's actions but also paved the way for a healthier dynamic between her parents. The conclusion, while not a traditional fairy tale ending, feels satisfying because it embraces imperfection. Ryan and Sarah may never return to what they once were, but their decision to collaborate for Lily's happiness shows tremendous growth. It's a realistic portrayal of how co-parenting, though challenging, can succeed when both parties are willing to put the child first. The peaceful and hopeful tone of the final chapter leaves readers with the comforting idea that even after immense pain, people can build something new, something imperfect but beautiful.